What I specifically loved this week, finally, and we've been saying it on this show since The Voice, and going back to before The Voice, we've got to scrap all this Aboriginal flags everywhere, scrap all this welcome to country stuff, all of that rubbish has to go. It's dividing the nation. The nation voted comprehensively against it. And now, Caroline, Peter Dutton came out this week saying he will only stand in front of one flag, the Australian flag. What did you make of it, Caroline?
Look, I think it's actually an incredibly smart move from Peter Dutton. He's realised, and we've seen it increasingly with the stance he took on The Voice, for people to vote no to that, to his strong stance on anti-Semitism and in support of Israel, to so many other issues, nuclear, of course, as well, that he's willing to make a real distinction this time between the Liberal Party and the Coalition and Labor, and give people a genuine alternative when they go to vote next year, rather than thinking that they're going to just, are they going for a Labor Light Party? Are they going for...
Let's have a listen to what he said. Let's have a listen to what Dutton had to say. No grab. OK, we don't have a grab there. There you go. It's the last show of the year, so we're allowed to get away with this sort of thing. But what he actually came out, and we'll play it later on in the show, he actually came out and said that, James, that he would only stand in front of the Australian flag. Oh, what a terrific thing to hear from a future Prime Minister.
And Labor's response has been so disingenuous. Linda Burney said, well, he didn't support The Voice, so why would he stand in front of the Indigenous flags? Does she not know 60% of Australians did not support The Voice? As Caroline said, this is smart politics. Anthony Albanese said it doesn't cost much to show respect. Well, it does, because every time we do a welcome to country, it costs. Do you know New South Wales taxpayers were going to be up for $25 million for that flagpole on the Sydney Harbour Bridge to wave the Indigenous flag? Now, it cost less in the end, but for Anthony Albanese to say it doesn't cost much to show respect, the problem Australians have is we do respect Indigenous culture, but we pay every time we are made to show respect.
And I think I'm glad you've got your economic hat on this morning, James, but I would say it costs more than just money. I would say it costs Indigenous Australians every time we virtue signal. It's a false claim. So all the big businesses, Caroline, get away with going, oh, we've got a bit of dot painting stuff on our latest brand thing or whatever, or we've got a welcome to country or a sign out the front of the shop that says you're on whatever land it is. It actually costs children in remote communities where the focus should be on getting them into school, getting them educated and getting them into jobs. Instead, the businesses and corporations and councils and politicians are focused on all this symbolic garbage. Like you said, James, $25 million for that ridiculous flag on top of the bridge. All of that stuff comes at the cost of genuine integration and assimilation of those kids into the Australian way of life, Caroline, I would argue.
Yeah, well, I mean, even Indigenous groups are starting to reject this. You would have seen that story in the past week where an Indigenous leader came out and said, this is way too divisive. And the problem is that people who are being paid for welcome to country ceremonies can sometimes be not from the actual group that claims to be the original owners of the land. So there's conflict there. Why are they being paid when it's supposed to be a genuine welcome? And not only that, but they've become increasingly political and just inflammatory, some of the speeches that are being made, the rants, I would call them.
Well, we saw that bloke at the football, we've seen all that sort of stuff. But, James, I would say that Peter Dutton can win the election on this issue alone if he and the coalition play it smartly, get Jacinta Price out right at the front, standing next to Peter Dutton at every single opportunity and explaining to Australians. Australians love Jacinta Price. They're in love with her. They want to see, they would like to see her as the Deputy Prime Minister. I promise you that.
Or as the Prime Minister.
Or as the Prime Minister. That's going to come. Don't worry. That will come. There's no worries about that. But the point is that it goes to the heart of the issue of what is it to be Australian? Who are we as Australians? Are we going to be continually under the yoke of shame and guilt and we're not good enough and it's not our land and get off and all that stuff, teaching our kids, which we're teaching them in our schools, James, the kids are being taught this stuff? Or are we going to be a proud nation that loves our Indigenous component and wants to be one nation together under one flag? That's the critical question people need to ask themselves this Christmas, James.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as Caroline said, people are over it. And I mean, in terms of building respect for Indigenous people, how many welcomes to country have you sat through, whether it's on an aeroplane or at a sporting event? No one's paying attention. Yeah. And so it doesn't build respect for Indigenous people. It builds this almost a resentment that our country is being divided. And it creates a sense of victimhood and entitlement in Indigenous people who have great opportunities if they just embrace them, and most do. But the government building this victimhood is not smart. It doesn't help anybody. And Peter Dutton is being accused of being divisive for fighting division. It's typical Labor.
Yeah,
this is why Jacinta Price is so good. She argues on principle.
Yeah,
Labor
100%.
just smear and try to make smart-arsery comments.
That acknowledgement to country, which is distinct from welcome to country, that you hear on aeroplanes where it's usually white Australians delivering these virtue signalling lines, they're arguably even worse. They're just words, you know, then at
They're
least
worse
in some
words
cases.
because they're threatening the very sovereignty of this nation.
No, I mean, but they're just words. They're not giving any money to Indigenous groups. They're not actually contributing anything to the cause. They're just virtue signalling.
They're corporate leeches, virtue signalling leeches, and it's got to stop. Peter Dutton is setting the right example. You watch, once our leaders set examples, you watch how quickly corporates follow.